The following is a special video presentation of the Hennepin County Library.
Hello. Welcome to a discussion with Harold Kushner. I'm Eddie Cohen, and my guest today is the author of To Life. Harold Kushner, who has been a rabbi for 30 years, in 1981 he wrote When Bad Things Happen to Good People. The book was an overwhelming success. He is also the author of Who Needs God? And When All You've Ever Wanted Isn't Enough, which was awarded the Christopher Medal. He was born in Brooklyn, New York, graduated from Columbia University, and he was ordained by and awarded a doctoral degree in Bible from the Jewish Theological Seminary. He has 6 honorary doctorates. Welcome.
Well, thank you, Eddie. It's a delight to be here.
You've called To Life a book for anyone who had a bad Hebrew school experience as a child. What do you mean by that?
What I mean is you've got all these people going around, adult Jews who have gained college educations, graduate degrees. They have a very sophisticated acquaintance with the latest books, music, the world of ideas, but they're still carrying around a 10, 11, 12-year-old child's notion of what Judaism is about. There are things in Judaism which work wonderfully well for children, but so much of the real power and the real message of Judaism is adult stuff. It's like those movies that are rated PG-13. You can't expect little children to appreciate it. No matter how good the teacher was, no matter how willing the pupil was, so much of it is just lost on children. And I'm trying to bring these people up to the same level of sophistication in their religious knowledge that they bring to every other aspect of their life.
Well, do you think that might have anything to do with the fact that they had to memorize a lot instead of learning a lot, do you think?
Oh, it could, but you see, even when it was done well, you can't do it that well. It violates a law of nature to take these 10, 11-year-old kids, put them in a classroom between 4 and 6 in the afternoon when their friends are watching television or playing ball. And then it's, the juvenile idea of goodness is what you get rewarded for and bad is what you get punished for. Children outgrow that. But if we never teach them where religion goes from there, their notion of religion is still this childish level. And so they go around saying, what's the matter that God didn't reward me for what I did, or why doesn't God punish people for doing something wicked, or I no longer believe that God will reward me if I go to synagogue, keep the dietary laws, give charity, and therefore why should I do it? And that's a childish level of discussing it. I'm trying to elevate that same kind of questioning, which is legitimate. Why should I do these things? What do I get out of it? Trying to elevate it to a level of adult discourse.
What are the fundamental differences between Judaism and Christianity, and how do they lead to problems between people of the two religions?
Well, the problems, I think, have nothing to do with the differences. The problems are just because very often small-souled, insecure people get very emotionally involved with their particular brand, and they feel that they have to prove their loyalty by putting down other people's brands. The differences are much more interesting. It's not just theology, Eddie. For one thing, Judaism starts with a community, the great-grandchildren of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, going through the experience of Egyptian slavery, of God's redemption, of coming to Sinai, and only at that point does the people create a faith to embody what their religious experience, their encounters with God have taught them. Christianity starts not with a people, but with an idea. When Christianity starts, there are no Christians. There is only the idea about what was special about this man, Jesus. The idea attracts people, but it's the faith that creates the community rather than the community creating the faith. Now look what this means. It means, first of all, in Judaism, the center of gravity is in the people, not in the faith. In Christianity, it's in the theology, the faith. You become a bad Christian if you don't believe the right things. You don't become a bad Jew by believing the wrong things. You become a bad Jew when you no longer care about what's happening to the Jewish people. When you define religion as community rather than belief, It's a lot easier to insist on the rightness of your religion without having to say that other religions are wrong, because it's your community. It's like saying that your parents are the best parents, that your wife is the most wonderful woman on the world. You're not saying my wife is a better person than your wife. You're articulating your love and your belonging. It means that you can tolerate great diversities of belief. And one of the things that I think Judaism does so well, because it talks about community first, it understands that holiness is a social process. Holiness is how you relate to other people in your life. Holiness is not turning your back on this messy, imperfect world and going off to be alone with God. It's the way you teach people, the way you treat people, the way you recognize the image of God in people, so that in Judaism you have the concept of the minyan. Certain prayers can only be properly recited in public if there's a congregation around you, because there's a certain kind of holiness that exists only when people come together for that shared purpose.
And the minyan being 10 people, right?
That's right.
Yeah. And I know we couldn't say our prayers if we didn't have the 10 people when we've gone to do the memory for the dead.
That's right. 90% of the prayers you can say by yourself.
Yes.
But prayers which have to do with holiness are properly said with a public setting, with the minyan of at least 9 other worshipers plus yourself. And the classic example is the mourner's Kaddish, the prayer that a bereaved person recites.
Right.
When you come to the service and there are other mourners there, their presence does something to you. You no longer feel quite as singled out by fate. When you come to the service and you find that some of your friends have gotten up an hour early in the morning to be there with you because they want to make sure that you can say the mourner's prayer, there is holiness in knowing that these people have gone out of their way to be with you. Holiness is not rejecting the world. Holiness is immersing yourself in the world, and by your behavior, by your relating to other people, making it more like God's world.
That's very beautiful. What are the differences between the Orthodox, the Conservative, and Reformed Judaism?
Eddie, I'll answer the question, and when I'm done, I'll tell you why it's really a meaningless question.
Okay.
For 90% of Jewish history, there were no Orthodox, Conservative, or Reform Jews. There were just Jews. And some of them were observant, and some were less observant, and some went to services every day, and some slept in and never got there, and some always told the truth, and some lied. But they found their own approach to the religious tradition. When the modern world exploded, and you suddenly went from group identity to individual identity, and now Jews were welcome as individuals in European society. In Western Europe, Germany, France, England, Jews saw the invitation to join Christian society as being an invitation to culture, to universities, to symphonies, to the intellectual world. And therefore they wanted to minimize all the things in Judaism that created barriers between them and Christians, that made us different, and to emphasize the ethical dimension of Jewish tradition, the part we have in common. Meanwhile, in Eastern Europe, where the modern world was not as tempting, in Russia, being a Christian didn't mean universities and restaurants and symphonies and libraries. Being a Gentile meant you got drunk on vodka and you beat your wife, and nobody wanted to assimilate to that. And so the response of East European and some German Jews to the temptations of the modern world is not to say, I will compromise my Judaism so I can share in this, but to say, I don't want any part of it, and I'm not going to make any changes in Judaism. This is where you get in the West Reform Judaism. The ethical part is permanent, the ritual part changes in every generation. And in Eastern Europe, Orthodox Judaism, which says Judaism is the will of God and it doesn't change. In a conflict between the modern world and the will of God, which are you going to choose? In the United States in the early 20th century, you get a compromise between the two. East European Jews coming to this country, responding to the freedom that America offers its immigrants, saying, we want to be loyal Jews, but we don't want that to shut us out from taking part in this culture. The compromise is conservative Judaism. The tradition gets the benefit of the doubt, but where circumstances make it impossible or unacceptable. That is, if you're out in a world where you eat in restaurants, you don't eat the pork chops, but you eat the tuna fish salad. If you recognize that this is a world where women no longer stay home, women are in Congress and the Supreme Court and the CEOs of business, then you can no longer say that the synagogue is a place where only men conduct the service. The conservative movement says, where necessary, we'll adopt the tradition. Okay, that's the background. Now let me tell you why this is all obsolete and meaningless.
Okay.
A friend of mine says, you don't really have conservative, Reform, and Orthodox Jews today. you've got two kinds of Jews, serious Jews and non-serious Jews. A serious Orthodox Jew will have more in common with a serious Reform Jew than with a non-serious apathetic member of his Orthodox synagogue. Serious Jews will try to shape their lives by the values of the Jewish tradition. Whether they do this in an Orthodox, a conservative, or Reform idiom, they want Judaism to inform their lives. Non-serious Jews, Eddie, it doesn't make a whole lot of difference what kind of service you stay home from when you sleep late on Saturday.
I guess. Is it true that Jewish dietary laws are based on which foods are most likely to be contaminated and therefore dangerous to eat?
I think you're setting me up, Eddie. You know that's not the answer.
I did read it in the book,
Yes.
so I know, but I want you to tell us all.
Okay, first, no, you don't need religious rules to teach people not to eat spoiled food. They would have thought of that for themselves. And the dietary laws don't have to do with health. What they are is, first, one of the things that Judaism does so marvelously, to teach people to be human by controlling instinct. No other living creature in the world can do what we can do, to say no to instinct. All other animals are programmed by instinct. Only human beings can be hungry and say, I will not eat, can be sexually excited and say, I will not respond, can be angry and say, I will not lash out. We have the power to override the pressure of instinct. And one of the areas in which we demonstrate that is in our eating. Hunger is a very basic instinct.
Oh, yes.
When you can invest eating with categories of right and wrong, you have elevated it from an animal function to a distinctively human one. Now, what are these dietary laws you mentioned? They all have to do with eating meat. They all have to do with reminding ourselves eating meat is a moral compromise. There's a difference between having a bowl of cereal and having a hamburger. For one of them, you have to kill a living creature. And we never let ourselves forget that. If you don't have the temperament to be a vegetarian, we don't expect that from everybody, but we do expect you to remember that you have involved yourself in a compromise by having an animal killed for your dinner. So hedge it around with restrictions. Some animals, but not others. Animal has to be killed in a painless slaughtering method. Don't mix the flesh of the slaughtered animal with milk, which nature creates to nourish young animals and keep them alive. All the dietary laws have to do is with eating flesh and reminding yourself that I will respond to this as a human being, and there are some things I will not eat.
Is that why you're a vegetarian?
It's an extension of that. We kept kosher from the time I was raised in my family and after I got married. And the more we traveled, the more we got used to not being able to eat meat in hotels and restaurants, and we became very comfortable with it. So we just felt that being a vegetarian was an extension of the Jewish dietary laws. I wouldn't urge everybody to do it. If you're inclined that way, we feel very good about it.
Well, I think that's very interesting because I'm a fairly new vegetarian, and I really like it.
Well, I think what changed us was when our daughter went to college. And this girl who was a teenager could have gotten her mail delivered at the local McDonald's. Suddenly went to college, looked at what they were serving in the cafeteria there, became a vegetarian, asked us if we could possibly accommodate her new habits when she came home, and we who had served kosher meat at home stopped serving it. And we feel very good about that.
You don't miss it a bit.
Not in the least.
Good. How do you feel about intermarriage between Jews and non-Jews?
Oh, Eddie, that's a very hot button for Jewish families.
Certainly is.
For the Jewish family
Yes.
whose grown adult child falls in love with someone of a different faith, it's not just a matter of statistics. It's the sense that our family has been Jewish for 80, 90 generations in spite of persecution and risk, and now this is all coming to an end because some college computer sat him next to a cute girl from downstate in an English class, and is this where it all leads to? I think we're having a difficult time adjusting to the significance of intermarriage in the 1990s. Up until the last 10 or 15 years, if a Jew married a Gentile, it's because he was looking to escape from Judaism. This was his entry ticket into the wider, non-Jewish, non-discriminating, non-anti-Semitic world. Today it doesn't happen that way. Today it's simply a matter of biological attraction. And so the Jewish community has to learn not to see the intermarrying Jew as a traitor, as a person who's trying to run away, but to see the two-faith family as an opportunity to strengthen the Jewish community. The first thing I tell people who come to me because they're of different religions and they think of marrying is, you run the risk of deciding today that there will be no religion in your home because you can't agree on a religion. This may not worry you at age 24, but what happens if at age 32 or 42 you suddenly have a spiritual need for something more and you can't agree on a religion? And what happens when your children come along and you don't want to make the mistake of confusing them by saying you're half Jewish and half Christian, and that you want to give them a specific Jewish identity? How are you going to deal with that? I urge people very strenuously, even if you don't share a common faith, give your children one religious identity, whichever one. If you decide to raise them as Jews, take them to the grandparents' house to see a Christmas tree and to receive the Easter bunny eggs. If you decide to raise them as Christians, take them to the Jewish grandparents for a Passover Seder and for the Jewish services in the synagogue. Let them know about the other half of their heritage, but they have to know you are Jewish children or you are Christian children and not a mixture of both. And to the young man and the young woman who are thinking of marrying, I would say to them, why are you doing this to yourselves to make religion a divisive issue in your lives? Search, talk, read, study. See if there's one religious tradition you can both be comfortable in, so that it becomes something you share rather than something you have to tiptoe around because it's divisive.
But would you marry them?
As a rabbi, I cannot officiate at a marriage where one of the parties is non-Jewish. I don't feel entitled to perform religious ceremonies for Christians. I only perform religious ceremonies for Jews, and I take the words of the ceremony seriously enough that I will not tolerate somebody saying those words as play acting when they don't mean them and they don't apply. I will do anything for an intermarrying couple. Spend hours talking to them, deal with how they can deal with the in-laws, how they raise the children, what kind of home, anything short of that 20-minute wedding ceremony.
Well, that is very interesting. Do you think that anti-Semitism can be reduced by teaching non-Jews about Jewish suffering?
I used to think maybe it would. I'm convinced now that it doesn't. First, my suspicion is that placing a claim on people's sympathy by telling them how much we've suffered does not lead them to respect us more. It leads them to resent that demand for sympathy. Eddie, I grew up in Brooklyn, in Crown Heights, where right now you're having this confrontation between the Lubavitch Hasidic Jews and the blacks. It hurts me terribly, as somebody who marched with Martin Luther King in the 1960s, to see this black-Jewish face-off, this confrontation is very painful. What makes it even more painful is that the blacks and the Jews in Brooklyn are each trying to gain sympathy by saying, my people have suffered more than your people. And this is so futile and so self-defeating and so pointless. And it's even inaccurate. Jewish history, Eddie, is not the story of Jewish suffering. The victims of the Holocaust, the European Jewish community, was a wonderfully productive community. You're talking about the community that gave the world Einstein and Freud and Mahler and Schoenberg and Kafka and Heine.
That's what I was going to ask you. What about the contributions?
Yes.
Right.
If the only thing you know about them is that Hitler came and tried to kill them, this is like teaching a course in American history, and the only thing you teach about Abraham Lincoln is that in 1865 he was assassinated, and you don't talk about what he did as president. Well, it's very misleading. It is educationally dysfunctional, and I think it just elicits resentment rather than chagrin and apologies from the non-Jewish world.
Yeah. What should we teach Jewish children about the Holocaust?
First, not a whole lot till they're probably 11 years old or so. It's really pretty shattering and frightening. If it does come up, what a young child asks when he asks about anti-Semitism, pogroms, Holocaust, is not Jewish history, but his own security. The 5, 6, 7-year-old who maybe has heard or seen something about the news. What I would teach them is that, yes, there are some crazy people out in the world who want to hurt us, but the government is on our side. That's what makes the United States different from Nazi Germany or Spain in 1492. The government, the police, they're all trying to make sure that these people can't hurt us. Secondly, when they do come of age to study the Holocaust, I don't only want them to learn about Jewish suffering and Nazi villainy. Teach them about the heroism of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, and teach them about other kinds of heroism as well. There was heroism in the woman who shared her bread with her neighbor when bread was so scarce. Why should people only know the name of Adolf Hitler and not know the name of Miep Gies? Miep Gies was the Dutch woman who hid Anne Frank and her family in the attic. There is heroism there that, against tremendous danger and pressure, some European Christians reached out to save Jewish lives. That has to be part of the story.
Well, don't you think we should teach it to all children? I mean, it doesn't have to just be to Jewish children,
I think
does it?
so. I think that's why there's the Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington. But I think, again, as we were saying a moment ago, I think we should teach all children about what Jews did for the world and not only what the world did to Jews.
What about the concept of Jews as God's chosen people? How do you explain this controversial and provocative claim? Now, that can get a little sticky sometimes.
Eddie, my great teacher, Mordecai Kaplan, was so troubled by the concept of the chosen people. He found it so arrogant and offensive. He couldn't take it out of the Bible. He tried to eliminate it from the prayer book by rewriting all the prayers. I disagreed with him. I'm not as troubled by that. For me, the claim that the Jews are the chosen people is not an assertion of Jewish superiority. Listen, I was a congregational rabbi for 30 years. If there's one thing I know beyond any doubt, Jews are no better than anybody else. My congregants were just as mean, just as selfish, just as apathetic as any Christians in the street. For me, the chosen people is not a claim of superiority, it's a historical fact. For reasons I cannot comprehend, God chose to reveal himself to the world through the Israelites. He revealed the Ten Commandments, he gave us the Torah, the Jews produced the Psalms, the prophets. No other people did that. I don't know why. It's like all love. It's irrational. You can't explain it. It's not something we did or earned. God chose to make us the instruments. Now, here's an interesting aspect of that, Eddie.
Okay.
During the last election campaign in 1992, a Boston psychologist wrote a fascinating article about how many recent American presidents have had younger brothers who embarrassed the family. President Clinton has a recovering drug addict brother Roger. Jimmy Carter had Billy Carter. When John Kennedy was president, Ted Kennedy was an embarrassment to the family. Lyndon Johnson had Sam Houston Johnson. He said when it happens every time, it can't just be a coincidence. There's a family dynamic where the eldest child is the responsible one, the one who works to make everything turn out right, the one who will make the family proud. And the younger child is assigned all those psychological qualities which are forbidden to his older sibling. He can be funny, escapist, exasperating, acting out, irresponsible, maddening. Now, if Israel is God's firstborn, the people he first had a relationship to, Jews then are the responsible ones, the ones who have to take this world seriously, who work so strenuously to make the world better. And Christians are the ones who remind us, even if we try and fall on our faces, God will forgive us because he loves us so much. This is why I really cannot accept Christian missionary activities to the Jews. Let them be missionaries to the atheists, to the pagans, to the Buddhists, to all the people who do not know the God of the Hebrew Bible. But we're already there. The world needs Jews to bear witness to the strenuous moral demands of the Hebrew Scripture, and the world needs Christians to take that message and try and bring it to all of mankind, not to convert the world to Christianity and certainly not to Judaism, to convert the world to the recognition of the God of the Hebrew Bible and the standards of righteousness to which that God summons us.
And that is why we are chosen.
That's the way I understand it.
What does Israel mean to Jews?
You know, Eddie, that is the hardest thing for non-Jews to understand about American Jews. That is the question I am most frequently asked and the question that most American Gentiles are stumped by. There is no analog in Christianity. It's not like the relationship of a Roman Catholic to the Vatican or of a Lutheran to Scandinavia or to Germany. It's very emotional. It's very intense. It's a whole lot of things. It's, first of all, in the wake of the Holocaust, the assurance on the part of the world that they're willing to let us live, that there is a place in the world for a Jewish community, for a Jewish people. I would make a very important distinction between questioning Israeli policy, which anybody has the right to do, which I have done, and on the other hand, questioning Israeli existence. I can tolerate criticism of Israeli policy. I
Right.
cannot tolerate the suggestion that Israel has forfeited its right to exist. When people talk about changing Israeli policy, fine. When they talk about dismantling Israel, exiling its people, saying that Jews can only be a tolerated minority in this world, they can never be the dominant culture, I cannot go along with that. And then I think there is one other thing which causes American Jews to love Israel. This is a little bit strange. Look at what it has done to the public image of the Jew, so that the American Gentile now has learned to see the Jew not only as Woody Allen, but as Paul Newman in Exodus. That is, the Jew
Yes.
as the warrior, the Jew as the soldier. I'm not sure I'm happy about this. I think if I were an Israeli, I would rather have the world's third strongest economy than the world's third strongest Air Force, even if this did fit into the stereotype of the Jew. But for us American Jews, we love what Israel has done for the stereotype of who is a Jew.
You know, you tell a wonderful little story in your book about the British man. Do you know which one I mean?
Chaim Weizmann, who would go on to be the first president of Israel.
Yes, that's
During the First World War and shortly afterwards, he was lobbying for British support of the Zionist effort.
right.
Remember, the British House of Lords says to him, Weizmann, why do you Jews insist on Palestine? There are so many undeveloped countries you could have more conveniently.
Right.
And Weizmann said, that's like my asking you, why did you drive 20 miles to visit your mother last Sunday? There's so many old ladies living on your street.
I love that.
The idea is, we love Israel, we love Judaism, not because it's better, but because it's ours. The way we love our parents, not because they're the
Right.
best parents in the neighborhood, they're ours. And we don't have to invalidate somebody else's parents to love ours, and we don't have to say Christianity is wrong to say Judaism is valid for me.
Oh, right. You know, Rabbi, I can't believe how quickly the time is flying and there isn't much time left. Do you have a little story that you can leave us with or tell us? Anything that you would like to...
Maybe not a story, maybe just one point we haven't really covered. I have
Okay.
come to define the essence of Judaism as the science of taking the ordinary and making it holy. This is what Judaism asks us to do. To be religious, to do something religious, you don't have to go to a synagogue. You don't have to pray. You can be religious in the way you treat your checkbook, not only your prayer book. In the way you relate to your neighbors, not only the way you relate to God. Everything you do, the way you handle money, the way you tell the truth or lie, the way you use speech, these are ways of taking the ordinary and investing it with holiness. What God wants us to do is not to divide his world into the holy and the profane, but to see it as the holy and the not yet holy. Go out into the world and make the rest of it holy.
Well, thank you so much, Rabbi Kushner. Thank you for being with us today. This was just a wonderful opportunity for me. And thank you for joining us on the discussion. And the book, To Life, is going to be another bestseller. Overwhelming, I know it.
Well, thanks, Eddie. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you.
A presentation of the Hennepin County Library.